Lakers' coldest decision, LeBron James did not just leave the Los Angeles Lakers. He left behind a question so uncomfortable that the entire NBA is now staring directly at it. Was Bronny James ever truly part of the Lakers' future, or was he only the emotional price of keeping his father in purple and gold? Because the timing of everything is almost too sharp to ignore. For years, the Lakers sold the world a beautiful story. A father and a son. A legendary career reaching its final chapter. A young player fighting through pressure, doubt, and a terrifying health scare just to earn his place in the league. It was emotional. It was historic. It was perfect television. But now LeBron is gone. And suddenly, the same story that once looked like basketball history feels a lot more like front office strategy. Bronny's contract became guaranteed. The Lakers kept him on the roster. Because if the Lakers believed Bronny was a real developmental project, then this should be simple. Keep him, develop him, give him a fair chance, and let the young man prove himself. But if Bronny was drafted mainly to keep LeBron attached to the franchise, then the Lakers have a much bigger problem. Now they are holding on to the son after losing the father. That is why this story has exploded. It is not just about a roster spot. It is about loyalty. It is about leverage. It is about a franchise using family history as part of its business plan, then being forced to explain what happens when the superstar no longer needs the arrangement. And for LeBron, this is not just basketball. This is his son. This is the kid he watched grow up under the brightest spotlight in American sports. The kid who survived a frightening medical emergency, came back to the court, got drafted, and stood next to his father in a moment the NBA had never seen before. So when people ask why this situation feels different, that is the answer. Because Bronny is not just another late second-round pick. He is standing in the middle of a storm created by legacy, money, power, and one of the most famous last names in sports. The Lakers got the headline they wanted, LeBron got the father-son moment he dreamed about, but now Bronny has to carry the weight of what comes next. And the question is simple. Do the Lakers still believe in Bronny James when LeBron James is no longer in the building? Before we go deeper, tell us where you are watching from right now. If you think Bronny deserves a real chance on his own, comment 1. If you believe the Lakers only drafted him to keep LeBron, comment 2. And if you want more NBA stories like this, make sure you subscribe, because this drama is just getting started. The promise that changed everything. Long before the Lakers found themselves trapped in this controversy, LeBron James gave the entire NBA a warning. He told the basketball world exactly what he wanted before the final chapter of his career was over. He wanted to play with his son, not someday in a fantasy, not as a cute idea for fans to debate. He said it clearly enough that every front office in the league understood the message. Wherever Bronny James was, LeBron James could follow. That one sentence changed everything. Because from that moment forward, Bronny was no longer viewed like a normal young prospect. He was no longer just a guard trying to rise through high school rankings, survive college basketball, and fight for a professional opportunity. He became connected to the most powerful player of his generation. And that connection turned his basketball future into something every NBA team had to calculate differently. For LeBron, the dream was human. It was personal. After 2 decades of pressure, championships, criticism, expectations, and impossible standards, he wanted one thing that had nothing to do with scoring records or MVP debates. He wanted to share an NBA court with his son. But for teams, dreams become strategy. The Lakers saw what everyone else saw. If they could become the team that drafted Bronny, they would also become the team most likely to keep LeBron emotionally attached. That is what made the situation so powerful and so dangerous at the same time. Because family loyalty is one of the strongest forces in sports. But once a franchise begins building basketball decisions around that loyalty, the line between respect and manipulation becomes very thin. Bronny carried that weight before he ever played an NBA minute. Every workout was judged differently. Every scout report became a debate. Every mistake was magnified because of his last name. Every good moment was questioned because people wondered whether he earned it or inherited the attention. And that is the unfair part. Bronny did not ask to become a business plan. He did not ask to become a leverage point between a legend and a franchise. He was a young player trying to prove he belonged, while the whole world treated his career like a referendum on his father's power. That is why LeBron's original promise matters so much. It gave the Lakers an opening. It gave Bronny a path. But it also created the trap that everyone is now arguing about, because when a father's dream becomes a franchise's strategy, somebody eventually has to pay the emotional price. Bronny's fight under the brightest spotlight. To understand why this story hits so hard, you have to look at Bronny James as more than a name on the back of a Lakers jersey. Because before the NBA debates, before the memes, before the accusations of favoritism, Bronny was a teenager trying to build his own game under a spotlight most players would never survive. Imagine trying to develop as a young guard while every gym is packed, every missed shot is clipped, and every ranking is compared to your father, who just happens to be one of the greatest players the sport has ever seen. That is not normal pressure. That is a different kind of weight. At Sierra Canyon, Bronny was not just playing high school basketball. He was performing inside a national conversation. Cameras followed him, celebrities watched him, opposing crowds targeted him. Every time he stepped on the floor, people were not just asking whether he could play. They were asking whether he could ever justify the attention attached to his last name. And still, he kept moving forward. He became a McDonald's All-American. He earned his way to USC. He showed defensive instincts, athleticism, maturity, and a willingness to play the right way. Instead of forcing himself into a superstar role he was not ready to carry. That part often gets lost because the Bronny conversation is usually louder than the Bronny evaluation. Then came the moment that changed everything. During a USC workout, Bronny suffered a serious medical emergency that shook his family and the basketball world. Suddenly, all the noise stopped. The rankings, the draft boards, the jokes, the expectations, none of it mattered. What mattered was a young man's health, his future, and whether he would ever feel safe stepping back onto a court again. That is why his return was bigger than basketball. Bronny had to rebuild his body, his confidence, his timing, and his path. He had to return to competition after the kind of scare that would make anyone question everything. And when he finally came back, he was not the same prospect people had projected months earlier. His college production was limited. His rhythm was disrupted. His draft stock became harder to read, but he did not disappear. He entered the draft, he worked out, he got cleared, he kept pushing. And when the Lakers called his name with the 55th pick, it was both a historic moment and the beginning of an even heavier burden. Because from that night forward, Bronny was no longer just fighting to become an NBA player. He was fighting to prove the Lakers had not only drafted a story, the pick that divided the NBA. When the Lakers selected Bronny James with the 55th pick in the 2024 NBA draft, the room knew exactly what had just happened. On the surface, it was beautiful. A father's dream was becoming real. LeBron James, after years of saying he wanted to play with his son, had watched Bronny make it to the league. The Lakers had created a moment that no NBA franchise had ever been able to claim before. Father and son, same team, same jersey, same chapter of basketball history. It was impossible not to feel the emotion. But behind that emotion was the question nobody could escape. Would the Lakers have made that pick if Bronny's last name was not James? That question split the NBA immediately. Some fans said Bronny had earned a chance. He was a late second-round pick, not a lottery selection. Teams take developmental risks every year. They draft players with incomplete offensive games, limited college production, injury concerns, or long-term upside. So why was Bronny being judged more harshly than everyone else selected near the end of the draft? Others saw it differently. To them, the pick was never just about Bronny, it was about LeBron. The Lakers were not only drafting a young guard, they were securing emotional leverage over the most important player on their roster. They were giving LeBron the one thing he had publicly wanted more than anything else before retirement. And that is where the controversy became impossible to separate from the business. The Lakers were not a rebuilding team taking a quiet flyer on a young player. They were a global franchise with LeBron James still driving attention, revenue, ratings, and relevance. Drafting Bronny created a historic storyline, but it also helped protect their relationship with LeBron. It gave the organization something no other team could offer at that exact moment: a shared legacy. For the Lakers, the move made sense. The 55th pick rarely changes a franchise, but keeping LeBron engaged, motivated, and emotionally connected, that could change an entire season. For Bronny, though, that same logic created a problem, because the more people believed he was drafted to please his father, the harder it became for him to be evaluated like a real player. His best moments were dismissed, his struggles were mocked, his development was treated like a side plot in LeBron's final act. And that is the tragedy inside the history. The Lakers gave Bronny the platform every young player dreams of, but they also gave him a spotlight so bright it made fair judgment almost impossible. 2 seasons of leverage. For 2 seasons, the Lakers got exactly what they wanted. They had LeBron James still in Los Angeles. They had Bronny James wearing purple and gold. They had the father-son storyline, the viral clips, the emotional headlines, the national television attention, and the kind of historic image that no marketing department could manufacture from scratch. Every time LeBron and Bronny stood near each other on an NBA floor, it became content. Every warm-up, every bench reaction, Every shared moment turned into a piece of basketball history. The Lakers did not just have a roster. They had a story that moved across every platform in sports media. And in today's NBA, stories matter. Championships matter most, but attention has its own value. The Lakers understand that better than almost anyone. They are not just a basketball team. They are a brand, a stage, a global machine built around stars, drama, legacy, and spectacle. The LeBron-Bronny pairing fit that identity perfectly. But the basketball side was always more complicated. Bronny was not playing heavy minutes. He was developing slowly, splitting time between the NBA roster and the G League, trying to sharpen his defense, shooting, decision-making, and confidence. That is a normal path for a late second-round pick. But nothing about his situation felt normal because every developmental step was attached to LeBron's future. When Bronny played, people watched because of LeBron. When Bronny sat, people wondered what it meant for LeBron. When Bronny went to the G League, people debated whether the Lakers were hiding him, protecting him, or simply following a normal development plan. The son could not escape the father's shadow, and the organization did not seem eager to separate the two. That is why the word leverage matters. Bronny's presence gave the Lakers something beyond basketball. It gave LeBron a personal reason to stay connected. Walking away from Los Angeles would not only mean leaving the Lakers, it would mean leaving the shared stage he had dreamed of with his son. For a while, that emotional anchor worked. LeBron stayed. The Lakers remained relevant, the NBA kept talking, the family story continued. But leverage only works while the person being leveraged still wants what you are offering. The moment LeBron decided his next chapter was somewhere else, the entire structure began to shake. Because if Bronny's roster spot was built partly on keeping LeBron, then LeBron leaving forced everyone to ask the same brutal question. What happens to the son when the father is no longer the reason? The 24 hours that exposed everything. Sometimes in the NBA, one day can expose what years of public statements tried to hide. That is what made the Lakers' timing so explosive. Bronny's contract deadline arrived first. The Lakers had a decision to make. They could move on, save a little money, and send a harsh message before free agency even opened. Or they could keep him, guarantee the salary, and continue the development plan for at least one more season. They kept him. On paper, that decision was easy to defend. Bronny was young, his contract was inexpensive, he had shown growth as a shooter, he had defensive tools, he had G League experience. For a late second-round pick, that is not a bad developmental profile. Keeping him did not destroy the Lakers' cap room. It did not prevent them from chasing bigger names. It was a low-cost move with upside. But then came the next morning. LeBron James was not coming back. Suddenly, the Bronny decision looked completely different. What had seemed like a routine roster move turned into a clue. Fans began connecting the timeline instantly. Bronny's money became guaranteed, then LeBron's exit became public, and the internet asked the question the Lakers did not want to answer. Did they keep Bronny because they still believed LeBron might stay? That is the kind of question that can damage a front office, because it cuts straight through the polished language teams usually use. Organizations talk about development, culture, patience, opportunity, and long-term planning. But the NBA is also a league of leverage, relationships, pressure, and private calculations. This sequence made those calculations visible. If the Lakers truly believed in Bronny, then the timing should not matter. They can say he is their player, he has earned another year, and his development is separate from LeBron's decision. That would be clean, that would be fair. But if Bronny was kept partly because the Lakers still hoped it would help their relationship with LeBron, then everything becomes messier. Because LeBron got his answer, Bronny got his guarantee, and the Lakers were left with a player whose purpose inside the organization suddenly needed to be redefined. That is why this story feels so cold. Not because Bronny stayed. Staying may actually help him. The cold part is the uncertainty around why he stayed. Was it belief? Was it strategy? Was it hesitation? Was it fear of the backlash if they cut him too soon? Nobody outside that building knows for sure. But everybody can see the timing, and in the NBA, timing tells stories that press conferences never will. LeBron's silent message. LeBron James did not need to attack the Lakers publicly for the NBA to understand the message. His reaction was calm, respectful, and controlled. But sometimes, silence carries more weight than anger. LeBron knows how this league works. He understands leverage, business timing, and front office calculations better than almost anyone. So if the Lakers used the Bronny story to keep him emotionally tied to Los Angeles, LeBron would recognize it immediately. That is what makes this moment so complicated. For 2 seasons, the Lakers benefited from the father-son storyline. They got the headlines, the viral moments, the historic images, and the emotional connection that kept LeBron close. But once LeBron decided to leave, Bronny was left inside the building without the same protection around him. And for LeBron, this is not just about basketball. This is his son. The same son he watched fight through pressure, health concerns, doubt, and constant criticism just to reach the NBA. The same son who became part of one of the most emotional stories in league history. LeBron got the dream. He and Bronny shared the court. They made history. But now the dream has turned into a test that LeBron cannot take for him. Bronny has to prove himself without his father's presence changing the room. And maybe that is why LeBron's response felt so quiet, because he knows the next part of Bronny's career cannot be protected by legacy. It has to be earned. Can Bronny stand on his own? The Bronny James conversation needs to become fair. He should not be judged like he was supposed to become another LeBron. That was never realistic. Bronny entered the NBA as a late second-round pick, and by that standard, his development deserves a more honest look. He has shown defensive instincts, discipline, improved shooting, and a willingness to play the right way. He does not need the ball every possession. He can defend, make simple reads, and fit into a role if the organization gives him time to grow. But there are still questions. Can he handle stronger NBA guards? Can his shooting stay consistent? Can he create enough offense to earn real minutes? Can he build trust with coaches now that LeBron is no longer part of the daily Lakers equation? That is the real test. For the first time, Bronny may be judged more directly as himself, not as LeBron's son, not as a marketing story, and not as the emotional key to keeping a superstar. That might sound harsh, but it could also be the best thing for him. If he becomes a reliable defensive guard who can hit open threes and avoid mistakes, that is a real NBA role. It may not silence everyone, but it would prove he belongs. Now the Lakers must decide whether they actually believe in that path, because keeping Bronny is easy. Developing him seriously is the real commitment. The Lakers' next move. The Lakers now have 3 possible paths with Bronny James. The first is to keep him and develop him properly. That means giving him a real plan, honest coaching, G League reps, defined goals, and a fair chance to earn minutes. If they do that, they can prove Bronny is still there because they believe in his future, not just because of LeBron. The second path is a trade. A fresh start might help Bronny escape the Lakers' spotlight and build his career somewhere quieter. But it would also look cold. Critics would say the Lakers used him while LeBron was useful, then moved him once the superstar left. The third path is the most dangerous, keeping him without a real plan. That would leave Bronny stuck in the worst position possible. Too famous to develop quietly, too unproven to earn automatic trust, and too connected to LeBron to escape the drama. The Lakers cannot afford to drift. Every decision they make will be watched. If they keep Bronny, they need to support him. If they trade him, they need to do it respectfully. If they ignore his development, the league will assume the original criticism was true. The father-son dream already happened. Now the Lakers have to answer the harder question: was Bronny ever part of their basketball future? The real lesson behind the LeBron-Bronny drama. When you strip away the headlines, the jokes, the social media arguments, and the Lakers drama, this story is really about what happens when family, business, legacy, and ambition all collide inside one NBA franchise. LeBron James wanted something human. He wanted to share the court with his son before his career ended. After everything he had accomplished, after every record, every championship, every year under pressure, he wanted a moment that belonged to family more than basketball. There is nothing wrong with that. The Lakers wanted something strategic. They wanted to keep LeBron connected, keep their brand powerful, keep the spotlight bright, and turn a rare father-son story into a franchise advantage. In the NBA, that is not shocking. Teams make emotional calculations all the time. They just rarely make them this publicly. Bronny James wanted something simpler than both sides allowed him to have. He wanted to play basketball. That is the part everyone should remember before turning him into a punchline. Bronny did not choose to be born into the most famous basketball family in America. He did not choose to have every missed shot judged like a national referendum. He did not choose to become the symbol of LeBron's influence or the Lakers' front office strategy. He is a young player trying to earn a career. That does not mean he should be handed minutes. It does not mean the Lakers owe him a permanent roster spot. It does not mean criticism is off limits. The NBA is a results league, and every player eventually has to prove he belongs. But criticism should be fair. Judge Bronny by his defense, his shooting, his decision-making, his growth, and his ability to help a team. Do not judge him only by the shadow of his father. Do not turn a young man's career into a joke just because the business around him became uncomfortable. The strategic lesson for the Lakers is clear. If you use relationships as leverage, you better be ready for what happens when those relationships change. A roster spot attached to emotion must eventually become a roster spot justified by basketball. If the Lakers truly believe in Bronny, they need to prove it with development. If they do not, they need to handle his future with honesty and respect. The lesson for LeBron is more personal. Power can open doors, but it cannot play the minutes. A father can create the opportunity, but the son has to build the career. And the lesson for fans is simple. Behind every NBA transaction, there are people carrying pressure we may never fully understand. So now the question belongs to Bronny. Can he turn the most complicated inheritance in basketball into his own identity? Can he become more than LeBron's son, more than a Lakers headline, more than a symbol of front office politics? That answer will not come from LeBron. It will not come from the Lakers. It will come from Bronny's work, his patience, and what he does when the noise gets loud. If you believe Bronny deserves to be judged fairly, hit like. If you think the Lakers use this situation the wrong way, share this video with another NBA fan. Subscribe for more NBA news, drama, trades, and behind-the-scenes stories. And comment 1 if you think Bronny can prove he belongs, or comment 2 if you think the Lakers never truly believed in him from the start.